Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's September 8th, 2023, and today I thought I'd try and answer a question that I got from Debbie Thompson regarding San Marzano tomatoes. So I've got quite a few videos covering the San Marzano tomato plants that we grow here. We save our own seed each year from our tomato plants, and we process them, fermenting process, and saving the best seed from the best plants each year. So that's one of the things that's successful about what we're doing. That one of the things that leads to success. But I thought I'd go ahead and read the question now. Kevin, I planted about 10 San Marzano tomatoes, and only one plant grew tomatoes that were pear-shaped, but the other 9 plants grew tomatoes that were about 3 to 4 inches long, but only about 1.5 inches from one side to the other. Diameter may be 3 inches around from the top to the bottom. So they are the shape of fingerling potatoes. I used Alaska Moorbloom fertilizer. Lots of tomatoes, but they never became pear-shaped. Please respond to what I need to do different next summer. Also had some black mass at the bottom of the smaller tomatoes. What is that from, and what is it? The dark spots at the end of the tomatoes, especially the smaller tomatoes, it's referred to as blossom end rot. And the two things that are noted for triggering that are inconsistent watering, and certainly that all triggers back to calcium levels in the cells of the plants themselves. So a calcium deficiency. So you mentioned you're using Alaska Moorbloom fertilizer. So the NPK, or nitrogen phosphorus to potassium ratio, is 0-10-10. Tomato plants really need lots of nitrogen and lots of potassium, and so that ratio isn't the best. It's great for flowering plants, but it's not really good for producing fruit, especially tomatoes as well. And it doesn't address all of the micronutrients like manganese, magnesium, calcium, and so on and so forth. So I can't tell you what to do next summer, and I just noticed the battery looks very low in my camera now. But I don't believe in using, well, I'll say, I don't use fertilizers here. Now, Thea uses fertilizers for a lot of plants that she grows, and she does some fertilizers over in the nursery area. And we have used fertilizers for our blueberry plants because of very specific changes and changing the soil pH there. But what I think works best are feeding the microorganisms and allowing the microorganisms that are in your soil to feed the plants, and they will feed it what the plant needs to produce the flowers, to produce the fruit, to reduce the chances of blossom end rot, powdery mildew, and all sorts of things. Now, how do you feed the microorganisms? Well, one, when you're feeding fertilizers, you're starving the microorganisms, and therefore the microorganism colonies, they decrease in numbers and therefore aren't readily available to feed your plants. I hope that makes sense. If you don't feed the microorganisms, they won't be there in adequate numbers to feed the plants what they need to fulfill their growth and development throughout the season. So how do we feed the microorganisms? Well, we use cover crops, or we can use compost. So if we're thermophilic composting techniques, that's bringing the temperature up, making sure that there's adequate moisture, not too much moisture, enough oxygen so the plants don't go anaerobic. I mean, the compost doesn't go anaerobic and stays aerobic. And that means turning it. And I've made lots of videos on composting here, so you can refer to that. Otherwise, using decomposed manures and all, we run the risk of using manure that has persistent herbicides, and I've made videos about that as well. So persistent herbicides, even though you've been composting the manure, your compost that you have that you're feeding your plants will still have some bioactive herbicides in them and damage your plants as well. So it's getting to be really tough to deal with. That's why I'm a firm believer in, number one, cover crops. So growing plants on the beds, whenever your crop isn't there, having a cover crop on it. So like if you've been watching our updated videos, you see we have soybeans, which are nitrogen fixers, and you want to use nitrobacter bacteria to inoculate the seed when you put it in. We got winter rye in there. And if you look at some of our videos on cover crops, we've had all different mixed varieties as well. So by having the cover crop there and terminating it at the right time just before planting your crop, your vegetable crop that you want to grow, that way you're giving an abundance of the appropriate nutrients to the microorganisms, and they're healthy enough to feed the plant throughout the growing season and produce the fruit that you want. Could you have some cross-pollination as well? And I made videos about, saving your own seed and preventing cross-pollination. That's why we only grow now just the San Marzano tomatoes here, because we can collect our own seed from the best looking plants, the healthiest, because plants will adapt to your climate zone, your soil type, and all. So you only want to save seeds from your best looking plants because they've shown an adaptive characteristics to your climate, your soil conditions, and all. I hope that makes sense. So we save seed just from those plants. You can also have differences in the soil micronutrients that are in the soil in different spots. So there's soil that looks, the tomato plant that really looks great, the chemistry or the soil biology in that area that's feeding that plant might be different than the other plants. So by having cover crops and really establishing cover crops, that can make a big difference. If you're buying compost, then I would buy thermophilic composted compost and learn about that. That's something that's really important. What else? Blossom end rot, again, we use a drip irrigation here. Now, not everybody can do it, but a drip irrigation, I've made videos on the drip irrigation system that we use. It's initially kind of expensive putting it in, but once it's in, it's using very little water to water the plants on a regular basis, so you don't have that fluctuations in hydration for those plants, which can really stress them out. So like your season, you may have some really dry, hot times, but unless you're getting down there and testing the soil, you won't know about it. We also use weed mats in our gardens as well. Not all of our gardens, so I made videos about the differences when we use the weed mats and when we don't. But that helps to maintain the hydration in the soil, prevent evaporation, and it also helps to reduce the amount of weed competition that your plants are going through as well. So I think that covers it. So if you are going to use a fertilizer, use something that's high in potassium and high in nitrogen, not a 0-10-10. So that's one thing. Do I recommend using fertilizers? No. Is it okay? Do many people have great success with it? Yep, absolutely. I believe in feeding the microorganisms, because those microorganisms will be there year after year if you keep feeding them. And that just means keeping the ground covered and feeding the microorganisms year after year. They'll go ahead and adapt and certainly save your own seed from the best looking plants. Reduce the chances of cross-pollination. Don't be mixing in other ones that can cross-pollinate as well. It's really cool to go ahead and pick, oh geez, I want black beauties, or I want all different varieties of tomatoes, and that can really be appealing. But you're allowing wind and insects to cross-pollinate, and therefore you won't get a consistent type of fruit over and over again. We love the San Marzano because there's less water, more flesh, stores beautifully, freezes great, tastes fantastic. We use determinate ones, and I know I've talked about this in videos before. In Italy, the San Marzanos are typically just indeterminate, but through genetics over 300 years of developing these plants in different areas, they've adapted to different climate zones, different growth habits, because there's different genetic mutations that happen over time. And that's why I say pick pick the seed that are produced locally to your soil, your climate. Don't be getting mail order stuff from a different place that, geez, that seed doesn't have all of the same genetic changes that will allow it to be vigorous and grow and produce the fruit that you want in your location. That's why I say saving your own seed is best, or working with friends or whatever that are growing in your geographic area with a similar soil type. So I know I babbled on quite a bit about this, but that's it. So know your soil biology and soil chemistry. You can have soil tests done. We don't do that anymore. We rely on the microorganisms, those communities that we don't see. They're all microscopic. We just feed them. We save our own seed year after year of the very best looking plants. We don't use any pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizers in these areas, with very rare exceptions my wife uses, and we do extremely well as a result of that. I hope this is of some value. Please feel free to leave comments and suggestions so that we all can learn together. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye-bye now.